Hello and welcome once again to Profiles on the UCF channel. Today our topic is harnessing the power of the sun, and where better to turn but the Florida Solar Energy Center. Phillip Ferry is interim director and for more than 20 years has played a major role at the center, including helping to develop the center's new Hydrogen Research and Applications Center. Ferry has also been awarded 2 U.S. patents for photocatalytic devices and has procured and conducted more than 30 research contracts totaling more than $11 million. Welcome. Appreciate you coming by and joining us today. Let's talk a little bit about the center itself. And as we were discussing earlier, the center, the Florida Solar Energy Center, the name itself is a little misnomer because you do a lot more than just solar energy research.
Yeah, Ed, we do. Solar energy research is what got us started, but we've expanded our research portfolio to include a whole host of things, including the Hydrogen Center that you were talking about. One of our very large research programs that most people don't realize is that we have a large building science and energy efficiency research program at the Florida Solar Energy Center, as well as all of the things that are related to solar energy.
Can you give us an idea of some of the different things that you get into? I mean, are we talking about making people's homes more efficient? You're talking about offices, working a little better and more efficiently to conserve energy?
Well, the general philosophy is that we can make basically our building stock, which is over 35% of the national energy use is in buildings. That's another fact that's very little realized. In Florida, it's about 47% of Florida's primary energy use is building energy use, and we can make that building stock much, much more efficient. Now, to the degree that we're able to make it more efficient, then we can power it with less energy, and that has implications in the renewable sector as well, because it means that we don't need as many renewables to make a building do the things that it needs to do in order for people to use it the way it was intended to use. And it goes across the entire spectrum. It's from residential to commercial to office spaces, new buildings, existing buildings. Anywhere we can achieve greater efficiency, we want to try to do it. We know from the studies that we've accomplished that we can cost effectively increase the efficiency of virtually any building in Florida by somewhere between 15 and 30% at no net cost to the owner after you consider all the amortization costs and everything else. And so it's an opportunity that we have to do things that can both better the economy and improve the energy use in buildings. And when we marry that with renewable energy technologies, we get a synergistic effect that is profound in a lot of cases.
A lot of people that might be watching would say, okay, if I can increase my building efficiency 15 to 30%, I better be doing it. What can we do? Are we talking about putting more insulation in? Are we talking about devices? More specifics there.
Well, there's a whole host of things we can talk about. Enhanced envelope efficiency, where you talk about either using more insulation or something as simple as changing the color of your roof in Florida can make a huge difference. The difference in energy use between a conventional home with a dark shingle roof and a conventional home with, say, a white tile roof is surprising. I mean, just that one change alone can reduce energy use in Florida by as much as 20 to 25%. And sometimes these decisions can be no-cost decisions. In other words, when you are in the process of building or designing a new home, simply making the right color choice can cost you nothing but save you a lot of energy in the long run.
So it's a matter of people thinking about, like say when it's time to replace the roof, that perhaps they should consider a lighter color than perhaps that dark brown or black that they may have had before.
You bring up a particularly interesting point, particularly in under this summer's spate of hurricanes. One of the things which we lost most of was roofing and roofing material. And we know from studies that have been done all the way from Andrew on forward in hurricanes that there are better ways to provide roofing, and some of the systems that produce higher energy efficiency also are more hurricane and wind resistant. And so sometimes these things have a double-edged sword that also acts synergistically to provide better housing, for better buildings for Floridians.
Shouldn't we be kind of thinking in those terms from the get-go? In other words, before we even break ground, there should be elements in place that will give us maximum efficiency and perhaps be a part of the building plan. And I guess I should be asking, well, why aren't some of those things in place to help us save some energy?
Well, we can do that and we should do that. And there are programs in place. A good one, for example, the U.S. Department of Environmental Protection runs a program which is called Energy Star buildings. And these buildings are on the order of 30% better than conventional minimum code buildings. And what most people get is the minimum code building. And the minimum code building is, if you think about it, it's the worst building allowed by law. And so we can certainly do better than that. And EPA's Energy Star Homes program puts forward a goal that their homes are going to be 30% better than the minimum code. And Florida has built a large number of EPA Energy Star homes in the last 4 or 5 years. And we hope to see the percentage of new homes that take advantage of these increased efficiencies increase over time. And as it increases, that decreases Florida's energy use. One of the best examples that I know of is a home that we worked on in 1999 in Lakeland, Florida. We worked on it in collaboration with Lakeland Utilities, which is a small municipal utility south of us. And we were able to achieve, and we did a very interesting thing. We took a willing builder and we said, let's build 2 homes. Let's build one of them exactly the way you would normally build your houses, and let's build the other one according to a set of specifications that we developed for enhanced efficiency and for the use of renewable energy resources. And we were able to reduce the energy use in the enhanced house by 92% compared to that standard house. That's an astronomical difference in energy use. Now, that concept has essentially gone on to become known as the zero energy home concept. And the whole concept behind it is to reduce the required energy use of the building by efficiency as much as possible, and then power the rest of the energy uses that are left over with renewable energy resources like photovoltaics, solar hot water systems, and other devices like that.
Was there a big difference in the base cost between the way the home building was being done and the energy efficient home?
There was a significant difference in the base cost. It was on the order of $40,000. But one of the most interesting things about the entire story is that the conventional home sat empty and unsold for a long period of time after it was completed. The new, more energy efficient home sold before it was finished. And so, I mean, there is a demand for greater energy efficiency. It may not be as widespread as it needs to be, but the demand is there. Very often it's the fact that we don't have the willing participation of the standard industries that are in place. They prefer to do things the way they did them yesterday rather than to explore new ideas.
And certainly you recoup a large number of costs involved with light bulbs and all the other things in a house, even though you may spend a little bit more in the initial construction phase.
Yes.
Is part of your charge at the Florida Solar Energy Center to offer this kind of guidance and counseling to builders and homeowners? I mean, can folks give you a call basically and help get some assessment of how they can become a more efficient homeowner?
Well, they could, but what we're doing is we're actually trying to change the infrastructure that's out there. And one of the things that we do as the center is that we train and certify individuals who are highly competent to make energy improvement suggestions and do analysis, do actual energy analysis of buildings and improve the decision-making process on the front end. And so that's part of and parcel of what we do is we train these individuals, and we have trained on the order of 800 to 1,000. And they're called energy raters, and they're certified by the state of Florida, and we've trained 800 to 1,000 of those in the last few years. And so rather than try to give all the advice ourselves, we have limited resources. Our strategy has been to take the knowledge and move it into the marketplace through a cadre of trained individuals who have much more knowledge than is commonly available in the marketplace.
So you have raters spreading the word across the state, as it
yes.
were. Let's talk a little bit, you made reference to the storms that we experienced in the past, and certainly that is an ongoing situation. And in our earlier conversation, we were talking, or you were mentioning some of the devices that were used post-hurricane to come in and provide electricity and power in areas that had no electricity and power.
Right.
Build on that a little bit for me.
Well, one of the things that we developed actually a little bit before Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida, way back, was a portable photovoltaic system which was capable of being, hauled by truck, trailer, whatever, to a location where power was out and power was badly needed. We initially did this to help with hurricane relief efforts, and it turned out to be very, very successful in Miami. When Hurricane Charlie came through this past summer, we also used that unit in Punta Gorda to help power a MASH unit that was an emergency MASH unit that was established outside of a hospital that didn't have those capabilities. And as we experienced this summer with the spate of hurricanes we had, millions of people lose power, but in addition to that, we found that fuel supplies were not up to snuff, and there were often cases where it was difficult, very difficult, to get fuel. And so if you happen to have a generator, you may not be able to use it because you don't have fuel for it. One of the beauties of solar power production systems, and they're called photovoltaic systems, one of the beauties of those is that they require no fuel. They run on sunlight. Basically, we generally have nice sunny days after these horrible storms, and so they're available to produce power at no fuel cost and with no fuel needs. And we believe that this is a direction the state ought to move for greater hurricane relief after storms. If the people that make the predictions are correct, we're in for a spate of these storms. There may continue, and Florida may see more of them in the future. And we learned a tremendous amount in this past summer about how to deal with these storms and how to cope with them and how to move forward. And some of the stuff we learned was that these kind of systems can make a major difference in the people's lives who are affected by the storms. We have not just homes lose power, but the storm shelters where there are a large number of people congregated lose power. And it would be beneficial to the citizens of the state if there were more of these kind of facilities that could run on sunlight available for storm rescue attempts and things of this nature. And we're pursuing that, and we're going to work with the state to try to use some of the dollars that are likely to come to the state for hurricane relief to harden some of these places. We want to look at not only these portable units, but we want to look at installing more permanent units on shelters, particularly shelters that have special needs requirements, where we take people that are not necessarily in hospitals, but that have special needs. And when those facilities lose power, there can be health problems as well as comfort problems. And these kinds of systems can provide minimal electricity so that we can maintain as much comfort as possible. We can do minimum refrigeration, we can provide lighting, and make the lives of these people who have to exist for 3 or 4 days in shelters much more comfortable while they have to do that.
And this isn't pie in the sky stuff. I mean, this is something that has been tested and is a very efficient and effective method of getting some electricity to places that don't have it.
Absolutely. A good example of this is last year we installed 29 solar systems between 3 and 4 kilowatts apiece on 29 different school systems around the state. And so this is not something new. It's not something that has not been done. Those particular systems were installed for multiple reasons. One of the main reasons was that so that the kids in our junior education system, 8th through 12th grade, can have some hands-on experience with what we believe is going to become the technology of the future. And we want to interest more of those young students in the kinds of technologies that we work with on a daily basis and the research that we're doing. And as part and parcel of that, we actually created classroom activities and web-based activities that include real-time analysis of what that system is doing and data analysis that they can use in their math and science courses on a real-time basis in their school. And that was very, very successful. However, that particular program, as successful as it was, didn't target shelters. And we think that we should try to target shelters, and we should target the special needs shelters first. And then go on from there and try to provide some. And the beauty of these systems is that while they're there for hurricane disaster relief, they're also there on an everyday basis to provide power that can be used by the facilities, and very often this power can be used in place of peak demand charges, which are significantly more expensive times a day than normal times a day for energy purchases in our system. And it just so happens that Florida has this wonderful environment where the peak power, the most power that is produced by these systems, happens to coincide when the utilities have their peaks. And so that power is worth more than standard power as well. And so these systems could conceivably over time actually pay for themselves.
I was going to say it's like getting up to 3 kilowatts of power. Anybody who's looked at their phone bill lately would see that, on a month-to-month basis, that could add up pretty fast.
Well, not only that, in the kind of applications that we're talking about, you not only pay 6-8 cents per kilowatt hour for that, but you also pay $6 per watt at that peak time. And so the cost of that power during that peak time, when photovoltaics is working very, very well, is much higher than the normal homeowner sees on their bill.
In a related story, something I worked on in a previous life, we were talking earlier about some of the devices that are powered by the sun, but also are monitoring stations, if you will, that are helping perhaps to relay some information about storms and can continue to relay that information even when the power does go down. And I thought that was a fascinating program before, and it apparently still is, and it looks like you're expanding it a little bit as well.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what program you're talking about, but
those are the monitoring stations where they would monitor speed and wind storms that are coming through.
Correct, and basically what you're talking about is buoys that are at sea and stuff like that, and many of these weather buoys and temperature buoys most of them are now powered by photovoltaic systems. Another example of these systems is if you travel back and forth between the coast and Orlando on 528, you will see every mile a telephone. Well, that telephone is powered by a renewable energy resource. There's no utility line going out there. It's powered by a photovoltaic cell that sits on top of that light pole or on top of that phone pole, and charges a battery that keeps that phone working all the time.
What is the stat? Let's just get back to the real basic here, which is the solar energy, the cell itself, the device. How efficient has that become? Because at one time when they first started out, there were issues there. And then the thing that always seems to come up, and it's even come up in our conversation, is the cost. A lot of people say, well, this is a great idea, but since the upfront cost is higher than my cost might be for some other energy source, then I'm hesitant to make that commitment, if you will. So let's talk the energy side, efficiency side of it first.
Well, you brought up a fairly large subject, but to start at the beginning, in the early 1950s, Bell Laboratories developed the first photovoltaic cell. It's a photoelectric device that basically takes light energy and transforms it from pure light photons into direct current electricity. The first cells that were actually used commercially, for lack of a better term, were used by the space program in the 60s to power satellites. We just simply can't drag an electric cord up there, and so we have to have some means of producing power in these satellites that is totally renewable. And those cells were, by today's standards, horribly inefficient. They were on the order of 2% efficient, and they were very, very expensive. They cost on the order of $15,000 a watt. Today's cells, on the other hand, are much more efficient. We have laboratory cells that are pushing 30% efficiency now. And this is a new technology called thin film technology, where instead of creating silicon ingots the way we used to and then slicing them up, we are now capable of depositing through modern vacuum sputtering techniques highly efficient layers of materials on top of virtually any kind of substrate, and creating things that creating the photovoltaic effect in cells that are called thin film technology, thin film cells. And today we have single crystalline, polycrystalline, and thin film technology available broadly throughout the world. The photovoltaic industry is actually in an enviable position. For most industries, their demand is greater than the supply that is available. We can't make these devices in many cases as rapidly as the demand is increasing. One very good reason for this is that photovoltaics have reduced in price down to, from the factory, on the order of $3.50 a watt compared to that $15,000 a watt in the late 50s. And so that is a substantial decrease in the cost of these systems. We see that cost decreasing further. In addition to that, we see that the efficiencies are going to increase. And so we've got an efficiency increase and a cost decrease. At the same time, we see the cost of conventional power systems rising because fuel costs are rising. As T. Boone Pickens said, we're probably not going to produce a whole lot more than 82 million barrels of oil a day on a worldwide basis, and so we may be very near our peak oil production capability. Pickens should know, he's an oil man. Mm-hmm. And so there's a kind of an economic convergence occurring where the cost of alternative renewable energy resources is coming down and the cost of conventional energy resources is gradually rising. Sooner or later they cross. In addition to that, under the right kind of economic circumstances, it is already more economical to purchase photovoltaic power than it is conventional power. I'll give you an example of that. We'll go back to all of those phones that are scattered out every mile between here and Orlando. One of the major reasons they have PV cells powering them rather than conventional electric lines is that it would cost more to run the infrastructure grid all the way down that highway for those phones than it does to put a PV cell on them. And so what we call remote power applications, applications that are more than 4 or 5 miles away from a grid, from an existing electric grid, are already much more cost effective than bringing that grid in. The world is mostly undeveloped. Unlike the United States, most of the world doesn't have an electric grid. And so there is a very large demand for photovoltaic devices and systems around the world because they are actually cheaper than going with the installation of a complete electricity grid that covers large expanses of territory.
Well, bottom line, sounds like the time is now. So it sounds like the perfect note to end the conversation. And Mr. Ferry, we appreciate you coming by and talking with us so much today.
Well, thank you very much, Ed.
And that's pretty much all the time we have for another example of profiles. Our thanks once again, Phillip Ferry, and thanks to you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Ed Highland for the UCF channel.